not forget to unmute your microphone. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for joining the Institute of Politics' latest speaker series event. I'm Annie Henderson, and I am a first year at the Harris School of Public Policy. For tonight's event, Illinois' Next Generation of Black Leaders, we are hosting a conversation with three wonderful panelists. Appearing virtually from Springfield, we have Illinois State Senate Majority Leader Kimberly Lightfoot, a Maywood Democrat first elected to the legislature in 1998. Ms. Lightfoot played an instrumental role in the passage and enactment of the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus's legislative agenda to reform criminal justice, education, healthcare, and the economy in Illinois. In January 2019, Ms. Lightfoot became the first Black woman to serve as the state Senate Majority Leader. Next, we have Dr. Sybil Madison, who serves as the Chief of Staff to Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Prior to becoming the first Black woman to serve as a mayoral chief of staff for the city, Ms. Madison served as a deputy mayor for education and human services within the city of Chicago. She is also a graduate of the Harris School of Public Policy's Civic Leadership Academy. Also joining us is Nick Shields, who serves as communications director for Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle. Before his current role, Mr. Shields was a communications director for Cook County Clerk David Orr and oversaw communications for Navy Pier. Mr. Shields is also a graduate of the Harris School of Public Policy's Civic Leadership Academy. Our moderator for tonight's event is Taman Bradley, anchor of WGN Evening News and WGN News at 9 on Saturdays and Sundays. He previously worked for ABC News in Washington, D.C. Before we turn to the conversation, there's a couple of upcoming IOP events I'd like to highlight. Tomorrow, join us for a discussion about public safety and civil rights, featuring a discussion with U.S. Rep. Karen Bass and others. On Thursday, the IOP is hosting a conversation about the political landscape in the United States this year with Amy Walter of the Cook Political Report and NBC News' Mark Murray. The IOP's David Axelrod will be moderating the discussion, and dinner will be provided after the event. Both events this week are in person, and you can find out more on our website. Finally, don't forget to sign up for our newsletter so you can stay up to date on everything IOP related, including internships, more fabulous events, fellow seminars, voter registration, and more. Thank you again for joining us this evening. Please welcome Kimberly Lightfoot, Sybil Madison, Nick Shields, and Taman Bradley.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction. You may have noticed when I walked in, I was fumbling with my microphone. I'm supposed to be the professional here, and I moved it to my right lapel, which is where I'm more comfortable having a microphone, when in fact the sound people in the green room who got us ready for this knew to put it on this side because I'd be facing this side. And so a pro tip, have the microphone in whatever direction your head is going to go. And so I already botched that. So hopefully this program, though, gets a little bit better than that. Good evening. I'm Taman Bradley of WGN TV. Ask your parents. It's great to be here with you at the Institute of Politics. I am a big fan. This is such a wonderful environment for the next generation of leaders to learn and train. We know you will take the tools that you develop here out into the world and elevate our nation's politics. For the next hour to 90 minutes, we're going to have a candid conversation about racial equity with these Black leaders here in Illinois. Kimberly, Sybil, and Nick are political heavyweights in Chicago, Cook County, and Springfield. These all-star professionals are part of the changing political tide. Now, most people here tonight, they are familiar with Lori Lightfoot, Tony Preckwinkle, and Emmanuel Chris Welch. They are Black leaders in important posts. But helping them are scores of people behind the scenes, including Senator Lightfoot, who is in leadership, Sybil and Nick. And so we want to hear, Nick and Sybil, about your roles in government and how you got your job. And Senator Lightfoot, we want you to talk about Senate leadership and a little bit about your journey to the state Senate. So let's just go ahead and get right to it. Why don't we start with you, Leader Lightfoot? Tell us about yourself.
Good evening to all of you, and I'm so happy to join you virtually. I'm in Springfield this evening. We are in session today, but my name is Kimberly A. Lightfoot. I am the Illinois Senate Majority Leader, and I began serving in November of 1998. Which now means I've been there about, 20 some years times 7, a little over 100 years in politics. And I often feel like I was before my time. I was the youngest senator ever elected to the Senate at 29 years old. And back in 98, the legislature was just so extremely different than what it is today. I don't have the story about parents in politics. My grandmother had a 6th grade education. I just wanted more. I knew that there was more to life for Black Illinoisans, and especially myself as a young girl, just outside of the village of Maywood where I grew up. I'm the first in my family to earn a college degree. And then I went on to earn a master's in public administration. And quite frankly, it was just to get away from my dad. I really didn't have this strong desire or push because I was trying to be a state senator. But you know, that saying goes, first impressions matter. And I was actually asked to run for local office in my hometown after graduate school by the sitting mayor, and he was the first African-American mayor of Maywood at that time. And so I ran for trustee of the village of Maywood, and I served in that post. The current sitting senator decided to retire, and I was approached again, and they said, "You ought to run for the Senate." And I said, "The what?" I can't be Kara Mosley Braun. And they're like, "No, not the U.S. Senate, the state Senate." And so just to show you how naive, I was never interested in government or politics because I always felt like it wasn't teaching me truth. And I always challenged my teachers, and I always would walk away just as C average. I would get all A's and B's in every subject except social studies. And so I was just completely turned off from it. But I found out that I really needed it in order to advance and get my master's degree. So I had to go back and take an undergraduate course just to meet all my prerequisites. And so I was asked again to run for the Senate. I entered this crowded race of 7 people. I won the first race, and I just worked really hard every single day. I had little to no resources. And when the race was over, the campaign finance reform people wanted to put me up on this bulletin board to acknowledge that I run a Senate race with $8,500. And I told him, "Don't do that. I'm almost like out of total energy." I was so sick when it was all over. I was exhausted from just giving it all I had because I didn't have the resources to get my message out. So I literally walked 3 communities, you know, door to door, and made copies and did all that we could. But I was successful then, and I'm still around. So I'm just blessed to be able to serve. It's what my grandmother, my great-grandmother just taught my family, how to be givers with the little bit that we had. I just didn't know it had a name. I didn't know it was in the name of public service. I didn't know that it had a name until I pledged Delta Sigma Theta, and my sorority is a public service sorority. So then it started making sense. Okay, this is what we're doing. We're giving back. We're helping in the community. And I've just embraced it ever since.
1-year race for $8,500. That won't even pay for dinner when Springfield goes into overtime. Sybil.
Yeah. Thank you for handing it over, Soror.
Okay, so
Always good to do a little connection.
Yes. Similarly, I didn't expect to be in this role. This is my first government job. I was the Deputy Mayor for Education and Human Services before Chief of Staff, and I'm not the first African-American woman to hold this position, so I don't want people leaving here thinking I was the first. But I am a clinical and community psychologist by training. A lot of people don't know what a community psychologist is, but a community psychologist looks at systems and believes that if you change systems, you can then prevent intervention that's needed at an individual level or even a family level. So the system that I've always chosen to intervene in is the education system. Since 1995, worked in and with largely CPS schools around various aspects of reform, educational reform. And then right before coming into government, was working on out of school, getting more young people connected to out of school experiences. So didn't expect to serve in government, was in the Civic Leadership Academy as a not-for-profit kind of person. Had no idea that by the time I finished, I would have the opportunity to serve in the administration. But from a systems point of view, feel very humbled and honored to be able to work and think at a city level, at a community level, and have the opportunity to affect change. Yeah, I think that's what I'll say about myself.
We got it, Dr. Madison. Nick.
Yeah, first of all, let me just say thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I got a few more thank yous. I want to thank the Institute of Politics for this opportunity, the Civic Leadership Academy. What an incredible experience. So thank you. My background and how I got started. My mother was a school teacher for Chicago Public Schools. She taught at Paul Cuffey, Poe Classical School, and a third. My father was a mailman for 20-some years. Public service is what we know, right, in my family. We always read the newspaper every single day, and I'll tie it back in a minute. But we got the Tribune and Sun-Times every single day. My father always jokes and says that which he did, he always read the classifieds to me every single day, expecting me to get a job as soon as humanly possible. So that being said, to connect the dots, I'm 12 years old, getting ready to graduate from Kellogg on the South Side, and I was a gamer back in the day, and I was upset because there were no video game reviews in the newspaper, right? So my mom said, why don't you write a letter to the newspapers and say, why don't they do that? And so I did. And so I wrote a letter to the Tribune asking them why they didn't have video game reviews in the paper. They wrote me back, and I tell you no lie, my 13th birthday, they did not know it was my birthday. They said, hey, how would you like a job?
Oh my God.
So from 13 to 17, I wrote video game reviews for the Trib. That changed the entire trajectory of my life, right? And I saw so much. I was in a lot of newsrooms, typically one of the only African Americans in the newsroom, or one of the few, right? So I experienced a lot very early on. To the students here, I did internships every single year. My freshman year, I did internship at a place called Fox Sports Net that's now defunct, and they just have Fox Sports. My sophomore year, I was at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, thinking I was going to be in newspapers forever. My junior year, I wrote for the Daily Illini. I went to Champaign. And while I was there, the local newspaper, the News Gazette, had an opening. And I said, well, why work for the school newspaper when I could work for the city newspaper, right? So I applied there, and they said, yeah, we'll take you. And then from there, I got into an incredible program, a fellowship that sent me to the LA Times right out of school. So I was a reporter for the Los Angeles Times for a year, and then after that I went to the Baltimore Sun, where I was a reporter for a couple of years. Thinking I was always going to be in journalism, and over the course of time I was thinking, you know what, I've been doing journalism since I was 13 years old. I'm thinking about doing something different, This incredible opportunity to work at Navy Pier came up, and I decided to switch course. I was communications director for 4 years at Navy Pier, David Orr's office, and truly had a dream job right now as communications director for Cook County Board President Tony Parkwinkle. So that's a short way of saying it's, I've been very blessed with the opportunities that I've had. So anyway.
Nick Shields, from journalism to the dark side.
Or I saw the light. I don't know.
Speaking of the light, Sybil,
Yes.
you work for an historic figure, Chicago's first black woman mayor. Although she never held elected office before, Lori Lightfoot easily carried all 50 Chicago wards. She ran as an outsider, promising major reforms. A black woman mayor, that's something new. We know you examine systems, so how is the system of Chicago politics different under Mayor Lightfoot?
Oh, well, I would say it's not business as usual. I'll share, I was Deputy Mayor for Education and Human Services, and a lot of incoming meetings, especially in my first 6 months, people who wanted to meet and talk about education. And I had several meetings where people came in and told me about the work that they were doing and how they wanted to expand that work. And I would say, oh, that's great. Thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I'm glad that you want to expand the work. And we'd look at each other. And I would think, thank you. And they would say, well, and there was something hanging in the air. And it was clear that, they expected me to, I don't know, maybe figure out a way to fund what they wanted to do. And it happened a couple of times before I realized what was going on. And that, what we were doing was different than maybe what people were used to. So I think we're not business as usual in a lot of ways. That's just one way in terms of trying to be fair and transparent and equitable in terms of how things work, in terms of how the city works.
How has that been received?
I wouldn't say that it's been received well. I mean, I think it's a change. It definitely puts more onus on us to make sure that people are aware of opportunities, that people understand how the city works. We recently participated with Cook County and the state talking about all of the resources that are coming our way from the federal government, and had what we called a readiness summit to help people understand not only what resources were coming down the pike, but also what they needed to do to be ready for those resources. And I think because these things haven't always happened systematically, we've received a lot of pushback on that. The other thing I think that we've also had an opportunity to help people understand just how government works, that there's not a pocketbook or a purse or a bank account, that we make appropriations for our budget the year before. So if I'm having a conversation with you in 2022, a lot of the decisions have been made already through the budget that was passed through the council. And I think that those have been good conversations in terms of helping people understand how things actually work, and helping people really participate fully in how they work. I would also say, in terms of differences or changes, I think that we've tried to be much more inclusive. I think a lot about the number of people who can call a number of people who are in the mayor's office and have access in a way that they probably didn't have before, in terms of being able to sit down, talk to us, raise important issues, be heard, and actually see that play itself out. So I think those are two differences in how we're trying to do things.
Gotcha.
In City Hall.
And Nick, Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle, a veteran of politics. She's held her position since 2010. Before that, she was a Chicago alderman for 19 years. Vast experience in politics. What have you learned from her?
So much, truly, beginning with leadership and the way in which she is managing one of the largest counties in the nation, right? The way in which she puts equity first in everything that we do. This is not a talking point. This is our standard. This is in every conversation that we have, every policy conversation. How we operate, equity is at the forefront. That is just the truth. And she's been doing this. She's been living it, right? And so it's been great to walk into that and see that truth to power and to be a part of it. You look at what we've been doing just over the last couple of years when it comes to ARPA, right? When it comes to COVID and the impact that we've been trying to have when it comes to our residents of Cook County. We've done rental assistance. We're talking about doing abolishing medical debt plan. So many different things that we've been doing over the last year. Just putting shots in arms and that educational awareness component to it. Making sure that we've got utility assistance, housing assistance. That's just within the last 2 years, right? She walks the walk and talks the talk, and it's great to work for a leader who you can say that with confidence and with truth.
And we're going to return to COVID later in our discussion. Leader Lightfoot, after Michael J. Madigan's nearly 40-year reign as the leader in Springfield, your colleagues in the House elected Emanuel Chris Welch as the first black speaker. On the Senate side, you're one of the most influential lawmakers, as you were talking about earlier. And as someone who's made a number of reporting trips down to Springfield, I'm always struck by the number of black lawmakers, staffers, and lobbyists. There's a huge black influence down there. So I'm just wondering what you and your colleagues have been able to deliver for black residents.
Thanks. First I want to say that black influence has just grown recently over the last few years. I'm terribly proud of my state representative, Chris Welch, to be named our first African-American Speaker of the House. He and I grew up together from the village of Maywood, and that's a community that many people look down on and say nothing's good come from that community. And he and I both are in two of the highest ranking positions in state government as far as the legislative body. But overall, I was the chairman of the Black Legislative Caucus. And we knew that when the Black Lives Matters movement was just really high in full force, because all of those injustices that were taking place, COVID played this huge role in just sitting us all down. All of us were in this stay-at-home order. People across the country saw what we all saw at the same time. And I knew then as the chairman that I've got to do something big and bold and impactful and meaningful, and that would change the course of Black Americans being born. There's a percentage across this country that says 52% of Black people are born into poverty. So just don't even have a shot. You're just born into a system of injustice. And when I look at state government, especially having been there for 22 years at this point, I saw a lot of practices in our system of government that were deeply embedded in systemic racism. And any time I tried to make a difference or I debated an issue, I would be seen as the angry Black woman. But if any other nationality spoke up for what they believed in, it was okay. It was just strictly okay. So I spent time during my tenure of building up the Black Caucus to say, our voice matters, our opinions matter. We want everyone around this building, this institution, to be concerned about what the Black Caucus is thinking. And at that moment, we had the attention of all legislators. We had a governor that believes in equity and working with the Black Caucus. And I came to the caucus and said, we have to do more. I don't know what that is right this minute, but just stay with me and we're going to do something. And so we ended up building out the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus agenda to rid Illinois of systemic racism. And what we did was actually just looked at our lived experience and from what our communities identify as existing barriers and what they're constantly confronted with that brings about all of these challenges and inequities. And we came up with this 4-pillar system that honestly, it was just a vision God gave me, and I didn't know what to do with it, but I, leaned on others and say, hey, what do you think about this? Let's set it up this way. Let's have a retreat. Let's spend hours. We have to invest time. We have to do the work. And we came up with criminal justice reform, education and workforce development, economics pillar, and our healthcare and human service pillar. So we came up with this 4-pillar system that has so much embedded under each pillar. And so I was thinking, the last time I've seen an omnibus bill was in 2000. And I bet you if I go that route, no one will even know what I'm doing. And it worked. And so we were able to use an omnibus bill to come up with a number of initiatives that once implemented over a period of time will begin to change the trajectory on how Black children are born, the course that they take through the education system, the lack of economic supports that their parents are enduring, just a much fairer system where they feel safe in their own communities and protected by law enforcement who should be protecting them. And then the health and human services. If you're not healthy, it's very difficult to live a robust lifestyle when you don't have adequate access to health care. So we really just went there. We heard from experts all across the state and country. We called on anybody who we knew and learned from different states that were leading a cause in areas that could prove for our colleagues, show them the data, show them the research, get them to understand the necessities. And the governor opened his administrations to us, and we began having these subject matter hearings that went on for pretty much just took an 8-month, every day, 12-hour day process to get this done. And we did so, and we're still now building on that because many of it required follow-up. A lot of task force created, a lot of commissions created for more information because, again, we're trying to loosen up a system that's not particularly in favor of our community. And so now we're just trying to do all that we can to follow up, make sure that we fulfill our obligations, continue to make sure that the administration actually put into practice what we've created. And that's what we've been doing with the 4-pillar system over the past year.
Leader Lightfoot, can I just ask you about cannabis equity? The program that you passed was sold as an opportunity for people disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs to benefit from the budding, pun intended, industry. Initially, there were no Black owners of cannabis shops. Was that a source of frustration for you, and how difficult has it been to actually deliver the equity you sought?
Oh my, was it? But let me roll back to when we created cannabis in the medical space. I'll tell you and all of you there, I missed it. I believe we all missed it. And there was this full industry created, and there was not one Black owner, and still today, not a single Black owner in the medical cannabis space. So what we said as Black Caucus members, and again, me as chair of the Black Caucus, I said, there's no way we are going to advance cannabis into the recreation space without there being Black ownership. So we knew then that we had to craft this law so that it could include ownership. And how do we do that? We created the social equity applicant provision, right? So we created a point system that would give additional points if you were a minority from a disproportionately impacted area. We created that title. We put a definition to it. We looked at all of the things that impact from the war on drugs. And we said, okay, how can we help clear up some of these records and get our Black men out of incarceration and back into the community and in gainful employment? How can we turn our community around off of a system that people are going to be rich in and make a lot of money from? And so it didn't do what we wanted it to do because we missed the mark on the scoring. If you look at the law in its fullness, it's a very good law. But the scoring is what made a difference because they all hired these people from all across the country and everyone got 100. You know, it's like everybody was a social equity applicant. They put someone on their team that qualified for them to be a social equity applicant. So hence the cheating started, you know, the get ahead still started, even with us creating the social equity component. And so I had a follow-up bill with my state rep, I've got two amazing, Representative Ford as well as Speaker Welch. But Rep. Ford and I started this House Bill 1443, and our goal was to address the social equity applicants and create more opportunities. So we had to create an additional 75 license to make sure that there would be ownership in that first round. Now, there are going to be more releases and more license going forward over the years, but of course that initial rollout is always the most important. Everyone's watching to see if the law actually works. And so we had some challenges there. The governor did the best that he could, and his team, former Senator Toy Hutchinson, worked really hard over there as the cannabis czar, so to speak. I'm not sure what her exact title was, but we worked together and rallied around pulling this bill together. And from what I've learned, there are quite a few African Americans who were awarded license. Now what's the holdup? It's just the whole, you know, someone file a lawsuit and that just slows everything down. And that's exactly, we're in a holding pattern.
So working to get some Black owners involved in the industry. Civil medicine, Chicago is experiencing so-called reverse migration among Black Americans, Black Chicagoans, losing about 10% of its population over the last decade. Can you talk about your effort to change that and to make Chicago a place where people of color want to live?
Yeah. We're working on this on a lot of fronts. We did experience a little bit of an increase in population with the last census, which is good. I think one of the things that I would lift up is affordable housing. We've invested over, I think, $1 billion in affordable housing, resulting in, I think, almost 1,200 new units. And thinking about how that housing needs to be located near transportation. So we know in our city, especially on the south and west sides, we have folks who live very far away from their jobs. So our housing strategy has been to locate housing near transportation, but also make sure that affordable housing is all over the city and start to chip away a little bit at the entrenched segregation that we have here in the city. I think our efforts to ensure that our education system is strong as well is another area that I think will attract people. And then, of course, working on violence and ensuring that we increase community safety in all our communities. We're focused on 15 communities in the city that are experiencing the most violence and really trying to put in some targeted strategies, working with community leaders from those communities to understand what the strategies should be, and organizing our resources around what leadership at the ground level is telling us will make a difference.
I want to talk about violence with all of you, but you also have your Invest Southwest program. Can you tell us if any of the projects you've started to break ground and where you are with that?
Yeah. So Invest Southwest is in 10 communities across the city on the south and west sides. These are communities where the city had vacant property that was contiguous and The idea is to invest. We're committing $750 million, city dollars, to invest in development in these communities, in these areas where we have some control of the land. It's somewhat of a medium to long-term play, but we know that when we make those investments garner other investments. So far we've put in $525 million into projects across these 10 communities, broken ground at least one site in North Lawndale, breaking ground on 3 or 4 other sites this year. And we're seeing private investment follow public dollars. So over time in these business quarters in these 10 communities, we hope that we can spur economic investment. We know that in these communities on the south and west side, people are spending their money, but how do we bring that money back into the community? And Invest Southwest is one way to spur that economic development.
And Nick Shields, Cook County has a 5-year plan to combat inequality. And back in November, the board passed the largest ever budget. Most of the spending is on public safety and health care. What additional services should people expect? And what is this 5-year plan to combat inequity?
Sure.
Or inequality?
Sure. So this was the president, as a part of her, a number of years ago, about 3 years ago, she focused on roughly 5 or 6 elements. It was healthy communities, vital communities, safe and thriving, sustainable, smart, and open communities, okay? In each one of those areas, as we talk about ARPA and our Affordable Rescue Plan Act, these dollars are going to be funneled and spent using that basic framework. So when you talk about the importance of folks wanting to stay not in Chicago but in Cook County in general, of course we want folks to feel safe. Of course we want folks to have that civic pride, which people love. People love their county. People love their city. And you're gonna see this $1 billion be invested, whether it be digital equity, right? Whether it's behavioral health, something that Cook County has not invested in before. This is something new for us. I think I talked about the guaranteed income pilot. This will be one of the largest that we'll be doing, largest guaranteed income pilots in the nation.
How many people?
We don't, not about people as much as money spent. So we're talking more than $40 million, okay? Violence prevention money that will be spent directly into the community. In small business assistance, which is stuff that we did even before the ARPA money, when we had the CARES Act dollars too. Investing in our small businesses, making sure that money is distributed equitably. I mean, that's the essence of Cook County and what we're about.
Mm-hmm. We're going to be moving to Q&A from the audience in about 5 minutes, so sort of prepare. We'd love to hear from you. I wanted to sort of throw out a question that anyone can take. I'm just curious how you've overcome racism on the job. Not everyone has welcomed you all into your positions. Alderwoman Michelle Harris's colleagues say she's been disrespected as she's presided over the city ward redistricting process. There's stories about how Cook County Clerk Karen Yarbrough was shouted down during an endorsement session. So how have you overcome racism, sexism, resentment? Anybody?
I'll take this one to start. I'm going back to back when I was a reporter, and my mother had just passed away, and I was still going to work every day, and very tough time. You lose your parent at an early age, early mid-20s, and I remember one day, I was just racing to get out of the house, looking a little disheveled. I'll admit to that, and I get to work. And I get pulled aside, and I get asked, hey, I get pulled into the office, and I get asked, hey, are you on drugs? Right? Mind you, folks who know me were going to laugh. I don't drink. I don't smoke, never have. Not my thing, never will, right? So those are the types of challenges being an African American male in the workplace that we have to absorb, right? That we shouldn't, right? It makes you resilient, right? But it also speaks to the need for diversity in the workplace, and compassion, right? And just bottom line, more people of color who understand, just in general. Is someone who's not of color ask the same question? I don't know, right? But for that to be the immediate question is that should be troubling, right? So yeah, that's one that comes to mind.
Black woman chief of staff, how is that received?
I mean, I think, much like what Nick is saying, lots of times when, and I know this has happened for Mayor Lightfoot as well, you think, if I were a white male, would this have happened? Would that question have been asked? Would that assumption have been made? I will only speak for myself, but this is not new. It's not new in this position. And agree that those experiences just help you build resilience. I grew up in a household. My parents are from Prince Edward County, Virginia. Grew up in the segregated South, and was raised to know that I had to be twice as good as anybody else to get ahead. So, you know, that was in my upbringing to be prepared for that. And I think perhaps in more elevated spaces, you get it even more, and you have to deal with it as gracefully as you can.
You all have mentioned equity and dismantling systemic racism tonight. I'm wondering what you would want white people to know about that effort. Do you ever strategize about how you sell your mission to white constituents?
Oh, sure. May I?
Yes, please.
Definitely, because my district is not just an African American district, and I represent all walks of life. And I've got, I represent River Forest, one of the most wealthiest communities. I represent LaGrange Park, but then I can also go to the Austin community, and I can go to Maywood and Bellwood and Broadview. And so for me, it's being consistent. It's really having true values and morals and not lacking in integrity. The same conversation that I have in the Austin community is the same conversation that I have in River Forest. And what I learned is people begin to respect you when they know that you're just you. I mean, if once I retire, I don't know if I could make it to 200 years in politics, but as soon as I retire, I believe that some of the things that will be said about me is that she was real. I mean, I hear people say that all the time. She's real, she's honest, she's not gonna, tell you what you want to hear just to pacify you. And I learned that early on because, as I stated earlier on, I was 29 years when I was elected to the Senate. The Republicans were in charge in Springfield. Jim Edgar was still the governor for that veto session, and the Pate Phillip was the president of the Senate. And so not only was I at the bottom of the barrel of the Democrats, I was definitely overlooked and disrespected by the Republicans and my colleagues that were Democrats and my colleagues who were Black. And there was only a few Latinos, but it was just they had an issue with my age. And I thought I did all that I was supposed to do. I did what I was told to do. And now I'm being punished for arriving here younger than I guess they had arrived. And so what I did is I started reading all their bios. I started looking at what they do. I began to study my colleagues so that I can understand, why do they walk past me as if I don't exist? Don't they see me standing here? Or why is it when I go into a committee room and I present a bill, someone will say, well, you don't know what you're talking about. That issue was out before you were born. And so I'm thinking, wow. So I challenged that chairman of the committee at that point and say, well, then why isn't it resolved? Why haven't you done your job to fix it? And so she later on came and apologized, but she apologized in private, but she publicly humiliated me in front of a lot of people. And so I told her, I'll accept her apology because she was kind enough to come give it, but I don't know that I receive it in that the same way that she gave it to me, you know, that she had embarrassed me in front of all of those people. But I take all of those stories with me as I go. Even till today, I'm still humiliated by some. There's still a lot of racism that exists. Especially coming up with this pillar system, people really showed you what they felt. And had it not been for everyone watching and seeing at the same time, I don't know if we would have had this amount of success. In addition to just the Black Caucus working in unity, you know, recognizing that this was our moment that we had to seize, and also knowing that I was in a leadership role that I wasn't going to relax or let up until we had something solid that could help our community. And so racism to me, it challenges me, but as my Sora just mentioned, my dad had me playing chess with him when I was a little girl. I couldn't go outside and play until I played chess with him. And if it wasn't chess, it was Connect Four. And if it wasn't Connect Four, it was some type of game to make me think, to challenge me, to look in different ways. I didn't know what he was doing. I wish he would have just said, Kim, I'm trying to prepare you for life. I just wanted, I just wanted to go outside and play. But I often reflect on some of that as in, oh, wow, look at my foundation that my dad helped me build unknowingly. But I want to challenge most, if not all, minorities today to tell your kids what it is you're doing and why. You know, stop, allowing us as young kids to try to figure it out. I think there's a lot of trauma that there wasn't a definition of trauma. But once I learned what trauma was, I go, oh my God, I've had trauma in my life since I was very young. And so I think it's important that we began to be open and honest about what it really is to be born and live Black in America and in the world. Anywhere you go, Caribbean islands, it doesn't matter where you go, you see Black people as servants. They're underpaid, they're mistreated across the world. And we've got to recognize that racism exists everywhere and we have a responsibility. And I don't blame all of my white colleagues or all white people at all, because they were born in a system that was different for them. So you learn what you live. And my parents always say, when you know better, you do better. And that's what I ask my colleagues to do. Now that we've empowered you with all of this information, you've been able to ask all the directors questions. Can you please do what's right? Is it right that we continue to have systems in place like this? And if you don't think it's right, help us make this change. And many of them voted for it, and some of them, still feel like they only did it because, and for whatever reason, because they didn't want to be called a racist. I appreciate them doing it for that reason.
Well, we know, Leader, that the Deltas, right? Okay.
Yeah. Oh,
well, that would have been a brutal mistake. Okay.
This.
Not the pinky. They don't rock with the pink and gray. You know what? As we approach about having 26 minutes left, I want to get to some audience questions. We're going to reserve the first 3 questions for students because this is about you. Microphone's there. Go for it. Anybody have a question? While we sort of wait for you to head up there.
Oh, here we go.
All right. Go ahead, introduce yourself and throw a question. If there's another question, go ahead and line up behind him.
First off, thank you guys all for speaking today. It's been really insightful and inspiring to listen to you all. My name is Andrew Simon. I'm a senior at UChicago. I study econ and public policy. And my question is probably mostly for Dr. Mazin, but I'm curious if you could just talk a little bit about the mayor's plans to address segregation in CPS schools, especially just considering the legacy of segregation that it does exist and the negative impacts it's had for students of color.
Yeah, I would say that there have been some policy changes to kind of address at least our selective enrollment system. Dr. Jackson made some changes to policy there to make sure that selective enrollment system was more open for diverse learners in particular. I think that's a step in the right direction. You know, Mayor Lightfoot wants to make sure that there's a high quality school in every neighborhood across the city, so that any family could have their child walk to school. And so it's a bit of a challenge to do that and address segregation at the same time, because, as you know, our city is very segregated. So I would say our biggest focus is on guaranteeing a high quality education in every school that's in the system, while at the same time doing policy initiatives like what we're doing around affordable housing to ensure that we have affordable housing all across the city.
Great.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you. It was very, ma'am?
Thank you so much. This was a really great panel. My name is Dr. Audrey Tanksley. I'm an internal medicine and addiction medicine physician. And as we talk about things like Healthy Chicago and Healthy Cook County, what we often see, especially in the Black community, is that when the 750 million or however many millions of dollars come to the community, they go to the same organizations that are wrought and with systemic racism in themselves, and are not trauma informed in themselves. And so the care that they continue to give to our community continues to perpetuate the gap that we have in health equity and in life expectancy and all of these things. And so I'd like to know how the city, how the county is looking at new organizations that are directly responding to the needs of the Black community. Because we talk about people of color, but realistically, when we look at the data, it is Black people that are consistently dying at higher rates, Black people that are consistently at the lower end of all spectrums. And so I'd like to specifically know how we're addressing that. And not just giving the same dollars to the same organizations that are not changing the outcomes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I appreciate that question. And you're right. If we look at the life expectancy gap, it's really Black Chicagoans and then everybody else. COVID has changed that a little bit, and so we're seeing some trends, but still an 8+ year gap between Black Chicagoans and everybody else. We're trying to make some changes or reforms in how we get dollars out. I mentioned the Readiness Summit. We have been listening to a lot of our smaller organizations, and what they're telling us are the barriers to their participation in the opportunities that we give. So, for example, we're starting to pilot a cash advance, because a lot of times organizations aren't applying for funds because they cannot front the money, and we have a reimbursement system. So we're trying to make policy changes like that will open the door. Also trying to think about different ways to structure giving so that, again, smaller organizations that have been on the ground doing the work can participate maybe through another organization. We have a grant right now, Healthy Chicago Equity Zone grant, that has regional grantees, but then they had to work to identify at the community level organizations that could be in leadership roles. So we're trying to rethink how we structure how money gets out, and also think about the policies that make it difficult for organizations to participate. But I would say that we've heard this, the mayor has heard this, completely agree that it can't be the same people over and over again, and we have to think as a city. And she's challenged us to think as a city about those barriers that result in kind of the same old over and over again. I appreciate the question.
Uh-oh, what's in it for the Black people?
That's right. How you doing? My name is Maze Jackson, and I just have a question. I wrote it. As next generation Black leaders, right? Because when I came here, this was about the next generation of Black leaders. I want to know what the future of, what you all see as the future of Black Chicago, particularly as I hear us continually talking about people of color, and as we're watching this people of color debate play out in the city council. And additionally, where do you believe we fit as it relates to the rights of undocumented immigrants to vote in municipal elections, because we're seeing it happen around the country, and it is part of the disenfranchisement of Black people. not people of color. So I'd like to hear a response to that.
Who's going to go first?
Who wants to take a crack at that?
I think May's question was loaded, and if he could repeat it, I could try to be helpful. I think the first part he said is like looking forward to the future. How do we envision Black people? If I got that right, Mays, help me. But we're hoping at the state that the Black Caucus pillars that we passed, it didn't get the attention that it should. It didn't get the promotion that it should. But when I tell you how life-changing, we were doing a public series with the University of Illinois at Springfield, and one of the African-American women professors, she is teaching her class, a lot of them at Eastern Northern, they're teaching their classes off of our pillars right now when they talk about equity and transparency and inclusion. And one of the things she said was that we're only 4 times removed from slavery, and that it takes at least that amount of time to implement, to get it to that level that you feel it. You're born into a society where it's not 52% Blacks across this country are born into poverty. But she says just the education pillar alone would erase 2 decades, So, and that's why I'm just so stern on implementing this to its fullest, because if this is implemented accurately, instead of 40 more years of poor education systems that are constantly developing individuals who cannot pass the city exam for a community college level, systems that do not take preschool children and ensure that they're ready to read by kindergarten, systems that automatically do not allow graduates who have a 3.5 GPA from high school, did a wonderful job, did all they could, but their high school didn't have basic requirements that the University of Illinois at Champaign-Urbana is asking for, so they automatically are disqualified, right? So those are the type of things that this pillar addressed, and it would raise 20 years of living in poverty.
Senator, I think what May's sort of raised also, a piece of it, anybody that wanted to take it, is do any of you see tension between Illinois' Black residents and Illinois' Latino residents, and how do those politics work?
Well, back up, because I do just want to touch back. Realistically, we just in this conversation talked about the great reverse migration. We're seeing Black people leave the city of Chicago. We're seeing Black people leave Cook County. At the same time, we are seeing a tremendous push for undocumented immigrants to get full rights. We've removed citizenship from our city documents. And so my question, because this forum was about the next generation of Black leaders, what do you see as the future for Black leaders here in Chicago? And then how does that work in conjunction with the rights that we are seeing happen for undocumented immigrants to vote? We're watching it play out right now in the city council.
All right.
So
Thank you, Mays. We got it.
Mays, I'm not sure if I'm going to answer your question completely, but I'll just speak personally. Look, I've got a 5-year-old son and 2.5-year-old twins who I'm raising right here in the city of Chicago. I love this city and I love this county, right? And we're invested into the city and this county. They and our other children are the future of Chicago and of Cook County. They are the future, and so we have to invest in them. We have to invest in them, and it starts from the very beginning. When it comes to your question about non-citizens, I mean, we're going to help everyone. That's what government is here for. Period. I'm not gonna get into the political question. I'm going to get into the moral issue in the moral answer. And the moral answer is we will always help and support our folks and residents of Cook County. Period. That's government's responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you for this opportunity, and
Thank you.
and I just wanted to say to our black leaders that I commend you all for the hard work that you all have to do to try to fix a system that's not designed for black men and boys and women to succeed in this city. My name is Tyrone Muhammad. I'm the Executive Director for Ex-Cons for Community and Social Change, a violence prevention, conflict resolution, mentor, reentry program. And I would say to you all and elected officials, I know Rep. Lightfoot, Senator Lightfoot, I'm sorry. I would just say to you all, it is unacceptable for the 80s war on drugs, Reagan, and the 94 Clinton crime bill to build prisons off the backs for 50 years for cannabis. And black men and boys still getting locked up every day on these corners. I know because I deal with them. And I also talk to the young men that's in prisons for cannabis. And I say to our senator that recreational cannabis shouldn't have passed without formerly incarcerated person and those who lives were affected by the war on drugs without being points. As you say, Senator, we are the veterans of the war on drugs. We should have been the first ones who that law or that opportunity served to repair the damage that was caused by the war on drugs. Secondly, I would say to our leaders up here to take back to the mayor, to take back to Pratt-Winkle and J.B. Pritzker if he's listening. Because when it comes to election time, we see you all in the communities. If you remove formerly incarcerated persons from violence prevention space, you will have none. We are the frontline workers in that. And it seems that the political expediency is to always deal with these same organizations and groups without really tapping in to the grassroots that is actually doing real, true behavior modification of the young men and boys that would do the killing, drilling, and sliding. And some of you students enjoy the safety of what we do, and y'all don't even know we exist. The gentrification here with the University of Chicago, for us, is unacceptable because the resources does not trickle to the circumambulate around the crimes a mile away. That's the murders and the carjacking and the violence that hasn't affected you all just yet. It will. And y'all have enjoyed the same safety and privileges that we don't even get to enjoy in our own city. So I would say to them that it's unbelievable when we have a mayor that's a black woman and a county board president that's a black woman to not even touch the communities or groups that don't fit her political idealism. You who are the leaders, I know y'all don't lead the people I represent. And I represent over 3,000 to 4,000 years of prison time. When do we, who have paid our debt to society, we probably stopped over 300 or 400 shootings in the last 2 years. But yet we still have no real representation. No taxation without representation. The constitutional decree has not served our communities. And ex-cons are the fastest growing population. We have the biggest voting bloc probably in this state. And we're going to exercise it. And all I wanted to say that tell your bosses, since you may not know, that we will be confronting and dealing with them as they roll through these communities, talking about what they do for us, because we haven't seen it.
Thank you, sir. You know, as I think we sort of saw, and I'm going to get to you, sir, from these questions, there is sometimes a sense that African Americans rise to the top of politics, but it's just a personal achievement. You know, in Chicago, about a third of African Americans live in relative poverty. And I'm not picking on Chicago. We have other communities throughout Illinois. But we have a number of black leaders in the city, in the county, and the state. What do you say to people who see your agenda, they hear the talk of equity and dismantling systemic racism, but they don't feel the impact? What do you want them to know?
I would like for them to know to get involved and become more engaged with what government is actually doing, what civic engagement, responsibilities, and rights that they have. And the previous gentleman that just spoke, he misspoke. The expungement was one of the main articles in the cannabis legislation. Thousands of records were cleared that had cannabis convictions. They may have also had some other.
Sir, let her answer.
There may have also been some other charges that they also had that didn't free them from the system because it was only to clear up the war on drugs piece that was on their record. So thousands, it's the largest expungement release bill in the country. And if you can find something that come even close, please share it with me. And then we also created the R3 program where we put money into for not-for-profit organizations to do just exactly what he just said. Now, if he has an organization that is meeting all of the criteria, that's got certified that everything that he needs to do, I'm looking for him because I believe in boots on the ground. I believe in grassroots organizations. That's what I support. I don't mind going door to door. I'm not afraid of my community. I'm not afraid of the people around me. You all know I've been carjacked recently. That was terrifying to have a gun in my face after I spent my whole career for that young man right there. I bust my butt for him for 23 years and he had a gun in my face and two guns on my husband. So none of us is free of it. None of us are free of crime, but every day I go to work, I work in a vein to try to help improve the Black community and improve all of our lives who need that help. You know, there's no way for me to say I can only do for a particular group when my constituency is a diverse group. So I have to speak for everybody, but I know where I come from and who I am. So I'm going to always represent my people. But I think there's this huge misunderstanding of what Black elected officials ought to be doing and how we ought to do it. We're up against a racist government. We're up against those prisons that you spoke about that were built in the 90s. I wasn't there. You wasn't there. None of us was there when they were built. They've been there. And how do we rid them? Because we need to educate. We need to empower our young people so that they don't fall into the juvenile system, so that they don't need a second chance. It's about prevention. We have to get them on the side where they won't need your organization, because they won't have to pay their debt to society and look for an organization to stop the shootings and stop the killings. That's what our conversation ought to be about.
Thank you, Senator. Sir?
Good evening. My name is Gregory Sherman. I am also with Ex-Cons for Community and Social Change. I am also a survivor of the war on drugs. I have a comment first, just because the senator spoke about expungements. As someone who can speak for the ex-con community, I just say to everyone who thinks expungements helped, what is expunging? What is taking away what you did to me without repairing the damage? If you took the Black man from his family for 10 years, and then you say, I'm just gonna take the record away, you still did not do anything for the Black man's family that was gone for 10 years. So expungement does nothing to help with the damage and the trauma that was caused by the war on drugs. That's the first statement. Second statement, the R3 program is fraudulent as it stands, because you have organizations that's on the books, is public record, who got well over $2 million of R3 funding, and those organizations don't even have office buildings. Those organizations have the highest rate increase of murders in the city of Chicago, specifically NAACP West Side Branch. And everybody else on that list of awardees from the $35 million that was awarded from the R3 grant. Where are those organizations? When you're talking about boots on the ground for real, people who in the streets for real, what justifies them people to continuously get that money? So again, the R3 fell short for the people who need it most. My question is, today we had so far 3 people die, including a 3-year-old boy that got shot in the eye. What is the city's plan? What is the county's plan to make this black death, brown death, a state of emergency? When will our elected officials stop with the political genre and say enough is enough? Last year, we had over 800 in Chicago, but people let the county off the hook. The county had well over 1,000 deaths, black and brown, in the county. What is the immediate plan to stop the next baby from dying tomorrow?
Sir, let me get you an answer to that question. Thank you.
Yeah, I can start and then Nick. Definitely agree that it's a state of emergency, and from the city's perspective, we've been trying to pull some pages from how we responded to COVID, and we've set up a community safety coordination center where we have all of our various departments who work on violence prevention in the same space, where we are building relationships with community leaders in the 15 communities that have the highest levels of violence, where we are working to coordinate our resources so that our resources go towards strategies that people on the ground tell us will be successful. So that effort, again, is much like what we did during COVID, which Senator Chair Lightfoot mentioned. We can't address this without working with people who are boots on the ground. We cannot, from City Hall, come up with a plan that doesn't speak to lived experience at a hyper-local level. In addition to using some of our ARPA resources, or many of our ARPA resources to address violence prevention efforts, et cetera, what we are doing that's different, I think, for us is really partnering at the community level and making sure that those resources are going where they need to be. I will say I'm very proud that the county, the state, and the city have been in conversation with each other to talk about that resource issue as well, and to make sure that we are not duplicating efforts, and that we are investing wisely and getting the kind of coverage that is needed. And I think this is unique and has never happened before. And Lynetta Haynes is here, and I just want to thank her for her leadership in that effort coming from the county to pull us together to be smarter about how we are moving and mobilizing our resources. But I definitely agree with what's been said here. And in our work with COVID, one of our partners, Darnell Shields from Austin, coming together said, you can't enact equity without having those most impacted at the decision-making table. And I work for a mayor who believes very strongly that that's what is needed.
We're running very, very low on time, but I did want to get to a question from a student on YouTube. Can we have that?
Half of a YouTube viewer. So Bonnie Richardson asks, can you speak to the Aurora mayor running for governor as a black anti-BLM candidate?
Well, you know, in fairness to him as the journalist here, I'll say that I don't think he presents himself as an anti-BLM. I think he says Black Lives Matter and all lives matter, so you can interpret that how you want. So who wants to take that?
No, I find that if all lives matter, then there wouldn't have been a need to say Black Lives Matter. There was a reason why there was a push and a creation of Black Lives Matter, because Black folks was being killed by police in the streets openly. Black folks were being put in prison who wrongly convicted, and it's been happening. And there was a group that says, you know, enough is enough. We have to stop this. Black Lives Matter. And I saw the commercial. I don't know if I remember him saying Black Lives Matter. I know I saw him say all lives matter. And I would agree with that. All of our lives are very important. All of our lives matter. But if we don't all believe that Black lives matter, then there lies the problem. And so that's the work that we're doing. I know the mayor in Aurora. He's been supportive of me, but I don't know that his points on this particular issue is in the right direction, you know, as it relates to law enforcement and the challenges that our Black communities are faced by law enforcement. I was never a supporter of defund the police, because we need police protection in our communities because of all the challenges and the trauma and all of the things that we deal with being born Black. But we also needed to make adjustments to how the resources flow and why. And get to a better way of providing more supports in other areas. So mental health supports is important. We need to make sure law enforcement are trained in cultural responsiveness. We need to make sure they have additional trainings, that they have body cameras for our protection. There's a lot of things to fund. So defunding the police wasn't the idea for us. It was more a shifting of the resources to better accommodate community policing and building a better relationship. So I'm not sure that I support his angle in our criminal justice reform piece that he's attacking right now. But, you know, I wish him well. I support Governor Pritzker, and I wish him well. So we are over time, but I was hoping to close with maybe just getting 30 seconds from you all, because obviously we're very politically polarized these days. You know, we're living in a pandemic. It's difficult to do your jobs. They're 24/7 jobs. We were reflecting in the green room of how this is a nice break from you know, what we would normally be doing. And so if you could just tell us in 30 seconds why you do this and why it's worth it.
I didn't talk as much about my childhood as you did, but I grew up in the church with parents who were not public servants, but were community servants. And so service has just been in my blood. That's, I think, part of my identity. And I think it's worth it because we all have something to contribute to the well-being of our brothers and sisters.
Yeah. First of all, thank you to everybody for this time. I think what we are hearing here is a lot of passion, right? Because we love our city, we love our county, and there's some pain there too. Gregory, I hear you. You know, like I said, I got a 5-year-old. I got a 2.5-year-old twins too. You know what I mean? I get worried too. I want to make sure they get home safely, right? I want to make sure that, you know, they have a full day at school and there's nothing that happens to them at school. I want to make sure that, you know, we don't get stopped by police and have an issue. You know what I mean? I want to keep them out of the criminal justice system. I want to make sure that they live in a city and a county where they can live and thrive, right? That's why I do this, because I genuinely love it. And I know Sybil genuinely loves it, right? I know the state senator genuinely loves it. and we love our people, right? And that's why we're here. That's why we do it, and we just want a better Cook County, a better Chicago, and a better tomorrow, right? That's what I'm all about. Public service has just been in my blood from day one, you know, and the bottom line is, you know, we won't stop. That's the bottom line. I hope that's a takeaway. We won't stop. We have people in color, we have black people in these positions who are thinking about these issues every single day, right? I don't want that to be lost in this conversation, okay? And these are the issues that we are talking about every single day. And the decisions that we make, Gregory, we're thinking about all of these issues. We're not going to get it right every single time, all right? And when we don't call us out, but we care. We care about you. We care about everyone in this building, about everyone in this county, right? And we really mean it. We invest so many hours. We invest time away from our families because we care and love each and every one of our county residents. And I truly mean that. And I hope that's a takeaway, okay?
Senator, you get the final word.
You know, I'm still trying to figure it all out. I've got to tell you, creating opportunity and access in this role has been like my greatest joy. When I think of like your purpose in life, if you guys remember, the Purpose Driven Life came out, and I used to read that book and try to write and still couldn't figure out what was my purpose. You know, why am I here? And I feel that from many Black families, you know, what's your purpose? And I felt like this was a natural. When I ran, I like talking to people. I like, you know, communicating with what we can try to create to better our conditions in life. I never set out to be an elected official. I never said, when I grow up, I want to be in politics. I did not like history. I knew from a young person in the public school system that this country was built on racist natures and behaviors and patterns, and that it would take a lot to unwind and undo all of this. And now that I'm in this role, and especially being in a high up ranking leadership role, I'm sitting at tables where if I'm not at that table, our voice is not heard, period. There was no conversations about creating a R3 program. There was to create $35 million in hopes that it gets directly to where we want it to go. No one's trying to create that but the Black legislators. And, you know, the same thing with violence prevention dollars. No one is sending millions of dollars to the Black community but the Black legislators. And so I get fulfilled when I know that hopefully it's helping, that it's making a change, that we're sending these resources. Because when I first got there, the conversation wasn't happening as it should have. There was not enough supports around Black legislators. And now it's a disadvantage when your own community is so disheartened over your work. There is a lot of pain, but the pain is being geared in a wrong direction. The pain ought to go into how can we look at a state of Illinois that's been in existence for 200 years and finally got the first Black speaker. That's the question. How can we make sure that our concerns are presented, that's on the table? How can we address pay equity? How can we get pay loans and not payday loans? How can we go to a bank and receive a loan? How do we keep those Black men out of prison? How do we keep them from committing a crime? These are the things that attract me. I want to get to the root of these things and feed into those things so that we can stop having this conversation that primarily points the finger at each other and really solves nothing. So that's, I don't know how I got here. I don't know why I got here. I just know that I'm grateful to be able to serve. And that's what I'm just going to keep on doing until I can't do it any longer.
Well, thank you. What a wonderful conversation. To the three of you guys, get back to work. Thank you very much. Students, you were great. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.